Welcome to Art with Miss Mary. I'm glad you can join me in drawing the Christmas tree lights. First, use a HB pencil to lightly sketch out the shapes of the trees. We're not going to add any details, and we're going to keep the shapes simple so that we can use the watercolor to add details. Alright, it's about done. Now let's add the string light. I want to add a curved line to make it more interesting looking. So here we go, a curved line. And now add some light bulbs in the sky part. Okay, 3 of them. And then let's add more strings to the Christmas trees so they can be embellished. Since this is a video, you can pause anytime so that you can catch up to the tutorials. Alright, I think we're about done. Alright, let's get to the next step. For this step, we will use dry on dry technique. We will use very little water, just enough to pick up the paint. First, we will use the dark green paint. If you don't have the exact same shade, you can add a little blue to your green to make it a little darker. And see how I am leaving the top of the tree white, that is intended to be snow, so don't fill it in. And see how I am using a single stroke inward to create the needle looking foliage of these fir trees. So they are very simple to paint, and I hope you're having fun. You can also practice on the scratch paper before you put it on your watercolor paper if you are not confident. See how I'm leaving a lot of white space in between each layer? Later on, these white space will look like snow after we fill in the background. Okay, let's start on the other tree. Same inward stroke, leaving the top white. Okay, you don't need to do a lot. We need to leave some space for the light as well. Okay. And you can also have variation in your colors, so it's okay. Some look darker, some looks lighter. That's natural. Alright, I think we can move on. For the tree trunks, we will use a little more water to pick up the color brown. And just a tiny bit more. And let's not do too much on the bottom of the trunk because we're going to use clean water to blur the edges. Okay, I'm going to pick up clean water. So I'm cleaning my brush now, and I'm picking up clean water, and you want to dab some away on the paper towel, or you'll look like this. Too much water. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm letting the color bleed out a little bit on the white space. That will show you smoother transition from the trunk to the ground. And I just use the paper towel to dab it dry, and also wiping away the extra colors that I don't want. So snow is white, but it has shadows and shades. So when we are adding just a little bit of like lightly brown water over the white space, we are creating the illusion of snow on the ground. I'm just dabbing in a little bit more brown paint on the trunk to make it stand out a little bit more. You will see I use a lot of paper towel to dab away the unwanted paint. Now we will paint the Christmas light. For the Christmas light, we're using the wet on wet technique. As you can see, I'm just painting the light bulb with clean water, just a little bit of it. And after that, I will dab some color into it. You just want to pick up a little bit of color. And what this will do is that it will let the color diffuse through the wet area, and that will create an illusion of light. And you see, after you paint your light bulb, I followed it with just clean water on the brush around the edge so that the paint will diffuse out. While this thing dries, we will paint the night sky. We will use the wet on wet technique. First, we're going to wet the entire area, but not touching the top part of your tree, leaving the outline dry. So you will see that I am not putting my brush over some of the white area on top of the tree. That will give us the illusion of snow later on when we put in color. I'm using my flat brush. I'm picking up water, clean water, and I'm going around the light very carefully. And I'm also going around the tree very carefully, making sure that I do not wet the entire white area around the trees. What I'm doing is so that later on, when we paint our night sky, the color will be very seamless. There will be no hard lines when you do this technique. Alright, I'm just going over it many times because you don't want the paper to be dry. Once it dries, the color will become very sharp and it will have a very sharp edges, and that's what you don't want in a night sky. Alright, let's see. You can kind of see the sheen that I'm creating on my paper, and that's also the reason why I asked you to use 100% cotton paper, and this brand is very reasonable price, Baohong paper. You can find it on Amazon. It holds water really well and it will stay wet for a very long time, and that will give you a very long time to work. Now I have picked up some purple paint, and this is a wet on wet technique. So the purple paint, I put quite a lot of water in it, but I also made sure that the hue is very deep. Okay, so you want a lot of pigment on this paint because the water is going to dilute the color. And see how I'm like going very carefully around the tree, leaving a lot of white space from the sky to the tree. Okay, because we want snow-covered tree. Okay, so we will just do this for a while and making sure you leave white space. And after this color, we will add other colors to make our night sky more interesting. But you can also choose not to. I just like to complicate things. And I made the mistake of putting my purple on the ground. And it's not wet on the ground, so now it has sharp line. I wanted to create shades of the snow on the ground, but you know, sometimes you can do too much on the watercolor, and there are times you just have to stop yourself, which I didn't. So you will see an example of me not stopping and making the ground look like sky. Hopefully you don't do that. Now I just picked up more blue. I wanted the sky to look multicolored. Like I said, you don't have to, but I just think it will be more interesting. Remember, you just have to pick up a lot of pigment even though the paint needs to be wet. Okay? I don't want to paint the entire area blue because then it's just mixing the two colors together. See how I'm just dabbing and not really creating any strokes. When you sweep it across your canvas, you're actually moving your paint away from that area. That's why I'm lightly dabbing these blue pigment on top of the purple. Okay? And see, now I'm not stopping at the foreground, which is a mistake. But oh well, it's already looking like sky on the ground. Okay, and now I'm adding my last color, which is black. I wanted to create a vignette looking effect on my night sky. So I'm darkening the edges of the canvas and also just a little bit in the middle just to show depth. Okay, now while the sky dry, I'm using my round 6 brush just with clean water. I just wanted to smooth out the edges. So because this paper can hold the water for a relatively long time, so the paint is not going to dry right away. And before the paint dry, you can manipulate the paint. by just using clean water on your brush, a little bit of it, and smooth out the lines and fill in some space by pulling in the paint around it. And there will be times you feel like that paint is not enough and you just pick up a little bit more to add it in. And while the canvas is wet, the color will blend beautifully. That's why, again, very important, your paper needs to be a good paper that will hold water very well. Okay, so I'm just going in between the foliage so that it looks seamless. Or you can leave some white spot. That could be your snow. Okay, but I'm just filling it in on my part. Let's see where else. Okay, a little bit more on this tree. Okay. Now you can see the white space that we have left really looks like snow now. You would find out more as you paint more watercolor that white space are precious. Sometimes I do too much and I paint over the white space, leaving none. And that kind of painting, although it can look beautiful, but white space just create a different type of depth as well. Okay, I think I'm almost there. Okay, and I think I will blend it a little bit more. I think the black paint came in a little too late, and now it's not really blending to the rest of the night sky. So I'm using a purplish and black paint. I mix it together and I make sure that it's very watery. I'm going over the black area, so hoping that it will blend with the rest of the sky better. This is called glazing. Sometimes when you have different colors together and they are not looking like a complete or a cohesive picture, then you can do a glaze to tie the whole picture together or the whole area together. So in this case, I'm glazing the night sky with this very light wash of purple and black pigment, hoping to tie the night sky together better. Now I'm going to apply more glaze, the same color black and purple mixture glaze around the lights and around the tree area, trying to cover the entire night sky space so that the color can blend in better. All the colors can be tied in by this glaze. Now I'm going to use a round 6 brush, and I'm picking up a little clean water, and I will be smoothing out the lines around the lights. That will prevent any uneven coloration around it. And I really do like that white that's surrounding the light. So in this step, we will use the dry on wet technique to add detail to the tree trunk while it's still a little wet. So I use just a little bit of water, just enough to pick up pigments from the black, and I just wanted to add some texture to the tree trunk. And now I'm going to work on those lights. So you see I picked up a very saturated yellow. So this is also dry on wet. I'm just putting it in. So you see the very light yellow around the dark yellow I just put in. Just makes that illusion that it's light emitting from the light bulb. So now I'm doing the same thing with the blue. So blue is usually very deep. It's a deep pigment. So you want to test it out on the test strip, and so that it's not like dark blue. Okay, all right, so now I'm gonna do the red. Red is also a very dark pigment, so unlike yellow, you have to pick up a lot for it to show. Red and blue, usually you just have to pick up a little bit and then you get very deep color. Okay, all right, that looks good. Now I'm going to smooth out the lines that I just painted around the light bulbs. So I'm using my round 6, and I just picked up just a little bit of water, not too much, and I'm just going over the edges, the outline of the light bulb that I just painted, and that will let the paint diffuse out to the outer rings. Okay, so that the line is not so sharp. We call this blending. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing with all 3 light bulbs. Okay, so again, you have to make sure you wash your brush first before you do it, or else you're going to transfer the previous color to the next color. So make sure you always rinse your brush well. Okay, right, so I just redid the blue one because it was diffusing out too much, and before you blend, you want to wait for it to dry a bit. So now I will blow dry this paper. It's important to let it dry so that the colors don't mix, and you can tell when the paper is dry, it's no longer damp. After your paper is dry, we will use the dry on dry techniques to add more Christmas lights to your trees. So I have sped up the process. So basically, you want to strategically place your light so that they can be seen. Don't place the light ones over the green part. Try to find the snowy part on your trees and place your light. My blue one is not really showing well, so I think only the red one will show. And so this is just the first layer, and you can come back later to intensify the colors after the paint dries the first time. Okay, let me put another yellow one over here. Okay, and now I'm going to smooth out the edges. See, I'm using a size 0 brush because these are tiny lights, so I am just using that with clean water to blend the borders of these lights. And I am cleaning the brush in between each. This process has been sped up, okay? So now I'm just doing the touch up on each light, okay? I'm also adding more pigment to each light so that you can see them more clearly. Okay. Now I'm using my round 0. See how small and pointy the brush is? Just like really blending out the borders of the light. There, the blue hue is coming out nicely. Okay, so now it's really looking like Christmas light. The blue is shining through the light bulb. Okay, now I'm going to do the same, okay, with the red. Now you see all these different light bulb colors will determine the light that is shine. For example, the red light bulb will shine red lights, the blue will shine blue, and the yellow light bulb will shine yellow. So interestingly, I think we're just like these light bulbs. In Proverbs 4:23, it says, "Guard your heart above all else, for everything you do flows from it." So we are like these light bulbs. Whatever we put in our heart, good things, good thoughts, good books, good movies, kindness, lovely things, then our action, our words will reflect what we put in our heart. But when we have a lot of pain, or we put a lot of unkind image or things that we read that's not kind, and we put that in our heart by reading it, by receiving it, then we can also reflect what we read and what we receive. So I hope that you are very careful with what you put in your heart, and you don't just receive whatever comes your way, because we actually have a choice. We can choose what we put inside our heart, and you can say no to images or messages that you hear that's not wholesome, that's not kind and lovely. Okay? All right, see, I'm going to intensify the yellow now that it has dried a little bit. I can add more pigment to it by doing a dry on dry technique. Now you can really see the yellow light on the trees. Very nice. Okay, so also watercolor is an art form that takes a lot of patience. As you can see, from the beginning to now, we have done layers upon layers, right? And that's how it is. In this step, we'll be using white gouache. It's also kind of like watercolor, but less transparent. So I'm using the dry on dry technique by using just enough water to pick up the white pigment. Okay, and I'm drawing 2 lines on each light bulb, and that will create the illusion of transparency of the light bulb. Okay, and you want to make sure these lines are on the same side, the right side or the left side, you can choose, but stick with it so that it doesn't confuse the orientation of the light. Okay, now I'm actually saturating my round 6 brush with a lot of white gouache paint, making sure my brush is quite wet. I'm holding it over my night sky and tapping my brush that's saturated white paint with another brush. And this is splattering all the white paint over the night sky. And there's our snow. In this last step, we'll be using our micro tip pen to outline the string of the Christmas light. So I'm going over the outline that I did earlier with my pencil and down the trees, okay? So this is one version of the Christmas light, tree lights. I have included another picture, which is a daytime version. So by just altering the color of the night, the sky, you can make this Christmas tree light have a complete different feel. Okay? I hope you enjoyed this tutorial.